Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Welcome to this exclusive question answer session. I already have some questions from the previous week, which I shall be answering first. You can post more questions on the live chat, and I'll try to answer as many as possible in the next 1 hour. Here's the first question for today. In a recent talk on Srimad Bhagavatam, 6th canto, 4th chapter, 6th verse, the speaker mentioned sanctions to the 4 sins. What was the sanction for intoxication in the same way Kshatriyas could kill goats? The scriptures explain that certain activities are forbidden in the scriptures, and anybody who performs them are considered to be committing sin. But everybody cannot completely avoid all the sinful activities which are specifically mentioned in the scriptures. Like, for example, people who are ignorant about what is sinful. They don't even know certain activity is sinful. For example, somebody born in the Western countries in a family which has a staple diet of eating meat, animal flesh. Now, neither the parents nor the children, nor even the, let's say they go to a church and they are religious minded, even in the church they are not informed about the fact that eating animal flesh simply by killing animals is sinful. Even that they are not informed. So one of the main reasons why people commit sinful activities is that they are in ignorance. And material world is a place where ignorance is predominant. The nature of material existence is ignorance. But to dispel this ignorance, the Supreme Lord has made so many arrangements even in this material world. Just like the bona fide Vedic literature, they clearly explain to us that we should not do sinful activities, and they clearly tell us what are sinful activities. Just like in Kali Yuga, 4 particular activities are considered the pillars of sinful life. Not that they are the only sinful activities, but among the many sinful activities anybody can commit as a human being, 4 activities are singled out for those in Kali Yuga as very grievous sins, and they should avoid at all costs. Meat eating, intoxication, gambling, illicit sex. Now, in the scriptures, it is mentioned that Brahmanas, because they are supposed to be enlightened in the Vedic knowledge, and Brahmanas are supposed to educate and enlighten and guide the other sections of the people in the society. So Brahmana should certainly completely avoid these 4 sinful activities. And for that matter, a Brahmana should avoid all sinful activities, because a Brahmana has knowledge or is supposed to have knowledge what is sin. But the others, the Kshatriyas, the Vaishyas, the Shudras, and lower than the Shudras, the Antyajas, 5th class, 6th class, 7th class people in society, they are supposed to be guided by the Brahmanas. Now, what happens in Kali Yuga? There is no qualified Brahmana. So, because there is no qualified Brahmana, the other sections of the people do not even have somebody to guide them properly about what is sin. The ordinary education in the schools and colleges does not teach what is sinful and what is pious activity. They don't even have any subject which discusses this topic about sin and pious activities. So, in the scriptures, it is said for Kshatriyas, because they have got such a big responsibility of ruling the people in a kingdom, they have a very, very big responsibility. And they have to actually act in a very, very difficult way that a Kshatriya cannot tolerate criminals, plunderers, thieves, rogues, doing any harm to innocent citizens or to weaker sections of people. A Kshatriya should be prepared to immediately kill anybody who tries to harm women, children, or cows, or Brahmanas. This is the code of conduct for a Kshatriya. Where are such Kshatriyas now? There are no Kshatriyas like that now. We don't have any Kshatriyas. So, what is described in the scriptures as permissible for Kshatriyas cannot be applied in Kali Yuga because there are no qualified Kshatriyas. But in the Shastras it is said, Kshatriyas, for their recreation, they may sometimes, when they are extremely tired or when they are exhausted after a long period of, let's say, fighting a battle, then for relaxation, they may drink some wine. But that also under restriction, regulation, not that they become intoxicated and perform all kinds of nonsense. No. Some little recreation. Only Kshatriyas, and that also only when they are under heavy stress and they are exhausted all their energy in fighting a big battle or dealing with some criminals like that. Then for just relaxation, they may take a little wine, or they may have some dancing girls entertaining them. So these are all relaxations only for Kshatriyas, only under certain circumstances, and that also under high regulation. It's not that they got a license for freely indulging in sex outside of the scriptural injunctions. No, there is no such a free license. No. For the Shudras, if they are addicted to meat eating, then the restriction in the scriptures is that they are allowed to eat only goat flesh after offering a goat in sacrifice to goddess Kali only, and are also under high restriction. So these type of allowances are given in the scriptures for some people, some category of people who cannot totally abstain. For such people, such allowances are given. But the idea is, by restrictedly engaging in such activities, the person will gradually become purified. Because when the restriction is there, That means all the time the person is not engaged in sinful activity. The other time, what does he do? He engages in pious activities. So, by limiting the sinful activities to a restricted time and rest of the time engaging in pious activities, they are gradually elevated to the spiritual platform. But that allowance never exists for Brahmanas. Never exists for Brahmanas. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, for those who are serious about going back to Godhead at the end of this life, in this human form of life, we have got a facility. We can practice spiritual life and go back to Godhead at the end of this very life. Whoever practices bhakti as taught by the Shastras for people in Kali Yuga, Bhakti Yoga, for them, if they're serious about going back to God at the end of this life, then totally abstain from meat eating, intoxication, gambling, and illicit sex. And by chanting Hare Krishna, gradually give up all other kinds of sinful activities. All other kinds of sinful activities. Become completely purified simply by chanting Hare Krishna to begin with, and particularly abstaining even in the neophyte stage from these 4 kinds of sinful activities. So understand very carefully, the prohibition is for Brahmanas, and it is said if you are a serious devotee, if you want to go back to God at the end of this life, then you have to compulsorily stop these 4 sinful activities, chant Hare Krishna mantra 16 rounds every day minimum, and engage in other supportive spiritual practices like taking prasadam, associating with devotees, hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, like that. Then, irrespective of the background of a person, the previous background before coming to Krishna consciousness, everyone who takes to this practice of Krishna consciousness can go back to God at the end of this very life. This is the boon. This is the gift of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Next question. What can stop our chanting? What should we be careful about while practicing chanting? Chanting is very, very simple, but we should understand that it is only by the mercy of the Supreme Lord and his pure devotee acharyas that we can actually chant the holy name of Krishna, the Hare Krishna mantra. It is not like mechanically somebody vibrates their tongue and simply vibrates the tongue and says Hare Krishna. No, it is not a mechanical activity. It is not as if anybody who can vibrate the tongue and produce any different sound can also chant Hare Krishna. It's not like that. So, a person who begins Krishna consciousness, when he or she is told, please chant Hare Krishna, and they begin to chant, then that is the mercy. That is a mercy of the Supreme Lord and his pure devotees upon the soul who begins this chanting. But after beginning to chant, one should not take it for granted. I can chant whenever I like. I can chant in any circumstances. I can do whatever nonsense I want, and I can also chant, because chanting anyway purifies me. So I'll be freed from all sinful reactions. No, it is not a mechanical activity. So chanting is a blessing. Being able to chant Hare Krishna is a blessing. And it is liberally bestowed. This blessing is liberally bestowed on everyone. But unfortunate people who are very, very materialistic, who are very, very sinful, who never perform any pious activities, such people cannot take to chanting Hare Krishna, even though they are given the chance, even though they are instructed, they are advised, they are given good instructions. They don't take up this chanting Hare Krishna. So anyone who has begun chanting has to be careful to avoid offenses. That's why after we begin chanting, we are instructed that if you want to make proper advancement in Krishna consciousness, in addition to chanting Hare Krishna, you should also consider that your chanting should be performed without committing any one of the 10 offenses against chanting Hare Krishna. So there is a consideration of 10 offenses. So one who is sincerely trying to avoid these 10 offenses. In the beginning, we may not be able to completely avoid all the offenses, but at least are we making an attempt to avoid the offenses? Are we conscious that I should avoid offenses? Now, these offenses we may commit while chanting, during chanting, or we may commit even at other times when we are not chanting Hare Krishna. Like the offense of inattention is particularly applicable when we are actually chanting Hare Krishna. You have to attentively hear the very chant of the Hare Krishna mantra that you chant, you vibrate the tongue, you produce a sound, and that very sound you have to hear attentively. So this attentive hearing in the beginning is not very easily possible. So we have to practice fixing our attention on the chanting. So in the beginning, there will be some inattention, and that is pardoned by Krishna because we are practicing and we are trying to sincerely try to fix our attention. But we should be conscious that we should avoid the wandering of the mind by restraining the mind during chanting. We have to restrain the mind. Similarly, we have to avoid offending Vaishnavas. We have to avoid disobeying the instructions of Srila, Prabhupada in our practice of bhakti. Like this, the 10 offenses we have to avoid. So if somebody does not avoid these 10 offenses, does not care to avoid, then one will not be able to chant. One will give up chanting. You cannot sustain the interest to chant every day. It will become a burden. And when something becomes a burden, some person who feels it's a big burden to chant Hare Krishna will stop chanting. So while we are practicing chanting, we should avoid the offenses. I would say we should try to avoid the offenses. We should make sincere attempt. And Krishna is very pleased with the sincere attempts of any devotee. And Krishna is very, 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 very pleased if we sincerely try to chant nicely, properly, and sincerely try to avoid offenses. Krishna is very pleased. He will help in every possible way to encourage us, to grant us advancement, and to strengthen us from within. He gives us spiritual strength. He gives us encouragement. He gives us better situations. Everything Krishna will do. We just leave it to Krishna. After making our sincere attempts to chant attentively, to avoid the offenses, to follow all the instructions as far as possible, to associate with devotees. That way we can be sure that we'll never stop chanting. Next question. Ekadashi is said to be very auspicious and dear to Krishna. In what way is it said to be auspicious and dear to Krishna? Ekadashi is the day we have to increase our spiritual activities and minimize other material activities which we may do for just maintaining this body or doing our material duties in the society. We can minimize those on Ekadashi to increase the spiritual activities. In that way, Ekadashi is considered very, very auspicious and dear to Krishna. Now, as regards death on Ekadashi, the question is being raised here. Why do astrologers say death on Ekadashi is dosha? Now, consideration of dosha is from the perspective of karma kanda, whether a person quits at an appropriate time to be able to elevate to heavenly planets in the next life. Swarga Rohana. So for that, there is a certain calculation astrologers do and tell if somebody dies on this particular day, it is suitable for going to heavenly planets, provided they have the pious credits. There are so many conditions to be fulfilled for elevation to heavenly planets, or for elevation to higher planets than heavenly planets, or for liberation, or for going back to Godhead. So many different considerations are there. But according to Bhagavad Gita and according to the principles of bhakti, a devotee who is seriously engaged in Krishna consciousness or bhakti yoga never bothers about these different conditions or restrictions for quitting the body, the time of death, never bothers about the time of death. A devotee simply engages in devotional service and prays to Krishna that please protect my devotion or my devotional service such that I continue to engage in devotional service life after life after life after life after life, and never lose my opportunity for engaging in devotional service. So this prayer and sincere practice of bhakti, according to the principles of Krishna consciousness, will guarantee that no matter when we die, we are going to get a better next life where our Krishna consciousness continues. Even if a devotee goes back to Godhead, what does a devotee do after having gone back to Godhead? Engages in devotional service to Krishna. Whether we go to hell or go to heaven or go to Vaikuntha or go to Brahmaloka or go to Swargaloka or remain on the earth, take birth in America or take birth in India, whatever, a devotee simply continues devotional service and continues from where he or she left off in the previous life. Please remember this. The advancement we make in Krishna consciousness in this life is permanent asset for us as devotees. Permanent asset. Nothing is lost. So, as far as practicing devotees, don't bother about the time of death. Don't bother about the time. Clearly, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 8th chapter, Shukla Krishne gatirhyete jagate shashvate mate. Ekaya yati anavrittim anyaya avartate punaha. There are two ways of quitting the body or dying. One is in light, one is in darkness. And if one quits in light, one does not come back to this material world. And if one quits in darkness, one definitely will again return to take birth in this material world. One cannot escape repetition of birth. So this description is there in the scriptures, but Krishna in the next verse says, Naite sruti partha janan yogi muhyati kaschana Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu yoga yukto bhavarjuna. The translation is the devotees. Yogi refers to devotee. The devotees know these two paths, and therefore they are never bewildered about whether they are going to quit in light or darkness. Therefore, be always fixed in devotion. By simply being fixed in devotion, that means simply following the principles of Krishna consciousness. Whatever time a devotee quits the body, whether in light or darkness, there is no need to do any calculation. A devotee is taken care of by Krishna to get a better next life. If the devotee is ready to go back to Godhead, then the devotee will go back to Godhead. If the devotee is not yet ready to go back to Godhead, then the devotee is given a better next life for continuing the practice of Krishna consciousness to perfect the Krishna conscious advancement. So it's a continuous journey of, just like a student, a good student who joins a school. The goal is to go to medical school and become a qualified doctor. But it begins in, let's say, kindergarten. Then kindergarten, first standard, second standard, third standard, fourth standard, fifth standard, sixth standard. No looking back. Continuously keep on studying, going to the next class, and finally get the medical degree. So that is true as far as ordinary education is concerned. But in Krishna consciousness, even though we begin, let's say we begin with chanting one round of Hare Krishna, we didn't know anything about Krishna consciousness. We have now come to know, and we are beginners. But we can make advancement very, very rapidly. Each one makes at his or her own pace, depending on how serious the person is, how much already one has made advancement prior to this life, and how seriously one is practicing, and how nicely one is applying all the rules, regulations, how good the association is. So many factors are there. Whatever be the factors, if one sincerely practices, one goes on making progress, whatever time it takes, Krishna will ensure that in the shortest possible time, we make advancement and we go back to God. The next question. In 4 sampradayas, Brahma Sampradaya, Sri Sampradaya, Rudra Sampradaya, and Kumara Sampradaya. In each sampradaya, please name the temples that are following those sampradaya. Now, to understand the followers of these sampradayas, who are the followers of these sampradayas? Vaishnava sampradayas. Brahma Sampradaya, those who follow Madhvacharya belong to this Brahma Sampradaya. Those who follow Chaitanya Mahaprabhu belong to the Brahma Sampradaya. Right now, the prominent ones who follow Brahma Sampradaya, Brahma Vaishnava Sampradaya, are the Madhvacharya's followers and the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, the followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. They are in the Brahma Sampradaya. So all temples associated with ISKCON, Gaudiya Math, and Madhvacharya's different followers, different matas, the Ashtamatas in Udupi, like that. All of them are followers of Brahma Sampradaya. Then Sri Sampradaya, all the Sri Vaishnavas. The Sri Vaishnavas are worshippers of Lakshmi Narayana. Their temples are there all over South India, particularly in Tamil Nadu, and even in Karnataka and Kerala, all the Divya Deshams, all the temples of Sri Rangam and Venkateshwara in Tirumala, Tirupati, all those temples, many temples. Even in Vrindavan, there are so many temples belonging to the Sri Sampradaya, the followers of Ramanujacharya. Then Rudra Sampradaya, the followers of Vallabhacharya, Pushti Marga Vaishnavas, especially in Gujarat and Rajasthan, they're very prominent. And they are there in other places also. Followers of Vallabhacharya, they're very prominent followers of Rudra Sampradaya. And Kumara Sampradaya, the followers of Nimbarakacharya, Nimbaraka, some Vaishnavas. They are mainly found in the North India, especially in Vrindavan, and many places in UP and even in Rajasthan and other places in North India also, Haridwar and all such holy places. There are followers of Nimbarakacharya. They are Kumara Sampradaya followers. Next question. What is the difference between Durga, Kali and Parvati? Are these forms expansions of Srimati Radharani? Durga, Kali, Parvati are all the different forms of the personification of material energy. Material energy is one of the varieties of energies of Krishna. External energy. External energy is represented by Durga or Parvati. Now, she is present in different forms for different functions. She has got so many duties in this material world. She is the consort of Shiva, and Shiva has expanded in so many Rudra forms. Each of those Rudra forms have got as their consort different expansions of Durga Devi. So many different forms, so many different names. Just like in the Bhagavatam 10th canto, it is explained that when Krishna ordered Yogamaya to appear as the daughter of Yashoda, and then Vasudeva exchanged the baby Krishna who was born of Vasudeva and Devaki with the daughter born of Yashoda and Nanda Maharaj, middle of the night. And the daughter was presented to Kamsa. Yogamaya was presented to Kamsa as the daughter born as the 8th child of Vasudeva and Devaki. Kamsa was completely bewildered. He was confused. He was totally at a loss what to do. But nevertheless, he thought, 8th child, there is danger, let me kill this child. So he attempted to kill that baby girl, and she escaped from Kamsa's hand, and she appeared in the sky in her form as Mahamaya. So Yogamaya and Mahamaya, though they are two different energies of Krishna, Yogamaya is the internal energy and Mahamaya is the external energy. Both of them are energies of Krishna only for different purposes. And Mahamaya expands from Yogamaya. So yes, in that sense, all the forms of Durga are expansions of Radharani only. Radharani is the original form of the internal potency of Krishna. And all other forms of the queens in Dwaraka, the Lakshmis and different Vaikuntha planets, the consorts of Narayana, and the different forms of Durga in the material world, all are expansions of Radharani only. Yes. So if you ask the difference between the different forms of Durga, Kali, Parvati, so many forms, they're all for different functions in the material world. Different functions. Their different functions are according to the different roles they play as consorts of different Rudra forms. There are so many Rudra forms in this material world for different functions again. Like Shiva is present as Bhutanatha, the Lord of all the ghosts. So as Bhutanatha, he has got a consort, one of the expansions of Durga, a fierce form of Durga, who appears as the consort of this Bhutanatha, consort of different Rudra forms, Kala Bhairava, Veerabhadra, so many forms are there, ghastly forms of Shiva, and the ghastly forms of expansions of Durga as a consort of these different expansions of Shiva. So many forms are there for different functions, many functions. So all material functions are distributed between different demigods. But among the demigods, Shiva and Parvati, they assume so many different expansions, forms of expansions, to perform so many different functions, material functions. Next question. How does a person who recently found Vedic teachings assesses which sampradaya is right for them without that information interfering with each other later on, as I've heard can be the case? Now, discovering Vedic teachings is not going to help a person actually understand the Vedas, the ultimate goal of the Vedas, the injunctions in the Vedic literature to be followed for specifically making advancement towards ultimate self-realization. All that is not possible simply by studying some Vedic literature. As much as you simply cannot study some medical textbooks and become a proper qualified doctor, medical practitioner. Not possible. You require to be under the guidance of an expert professor, expert teacher. Same thing applies for the Vedic teachings, to learn the Vedic teachings. You have to be under the expert of under the direction and guidance of an expert acharya. Acharyavan Purusho Veda. One can understand the Vedas and apply them properly only if one accepts guidance of an acharya. So Prabhupada is the acharya for our time now. Prabhupada is the acharya. So accept Prabhupada's guidance, and then everything is very clear. Ultimately, it does not matter which sampradaya one is following, as long as one accepts the shelter of the acharya. That is the important. Next question. When sense objects come in front of us because of past habits, automatic responses come, and sometimes we break the regulative principles. How can we break that habit and build character? Now, it's very common saying, habits die hard. That means if some habit is there, particularly bad habits, then they won't just go away if we make a determination, I want to stop. If somebody is addicted to drinking coffee, I want to stop drinking coffee. It won't just happen by my saying that or by my thinking that let me stop. I want to stop. I don't want to take coffee. It won't happen like that. Just won't happen like that. If it happens, very good. If you're able to stop. But mostly people are not able to stop just by a sankalpa, just by making a determination, just by deciding not to indulge in drinking coffee. It won't happen like that. So the most important factor for stopping old habits, bad habits, is to chant Hare Krishna. Very, very important to regularly chant Hare Krishna and strive to avoid offenses in chanting Hare Krishna. That is first thing. Second thing, the association of the kind of people that somebody who's practicing Krishna consciousness is having. If you are having association of people who indulge in these habits, drinking, smoking, taking coffee or whatever, eating meat or gambling or whatever, you cannot associate with people and expect that your old habits will vanish. No, it will never happen. You have to cut off such association. You have to cut off such association. One of the reasons people can't give up old habits is because of their bad association. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, Asatsanga tyage Vaishnava achar. A Vaishnava, a serious devotee, his achar, his behavior should be to give up non-devotee association. So asat, non-devotees, are of two kinds. One is the sense enjoyers, and second is the materialistic persons who are determined to defy God, determined to be independent of God, or materialistic, atheistic, materialistic person. So these two kinds of association we have to give up. If we don't give up, then we cannot give up bad habits. No. Then what about sense objects coming in front of us? See, our consciousness is getting transformed with association, by association with devotees, by chanting Hare Krishna, by taking prasadam, by hearing Bhagavatam. All that our conscience is getting transformed, is purified. The more the conscience is purified, the more strength you have to avoid, because you know you should avoid. So you will not succumb to the attraction of sense objects in proportion to the strengthening of your consciousness, purification of your consciousness. So the more you chant Hare Krishna, the stronger you become. Just like a child, how much strength, physical strength will the child have? But as the child grows up and has good habits of eating and assimilating the food and doing some good exercise and proper growth is there, automatically the physical strength increases. There's no need to do anything different or special or separate for gaining physical strength. Similarly, spiritual strength will be the basis of your disinterest in sense enjoyment. That is the basis, disinterest. And that disinterest comes automatically by practicing Krishna consciousness, giving up the association of non-devotees. This you please remember. Next question. Please briefly explain about one line on Dvaita, Vishishtadvaita, Shuddhadvaita, Dvaita philosophy. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Srila Prabhupada has explained in brief these four different philosophies. They are explained as Dvaita is the philosophy where it clearly explains the difference between the soul and the super soul, ourselves, that individual self, and Krishna. The differences are distinctly explained and highlighted so that these foolish people who are infected with the Mayavada philosophy and other materialistic persons who are ignorant about what is our actual position, they can clearly understand we are always very, very tiny part of the Supreme Lord, even though qualitatively we are one, but quantitatively we are very, 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 very tiny. So that's clearly brought out in the Dvaita philosophy. Two, soul and super soul are eternally two, always. Never they can become one. Never they can merge and the soul lose its identity. Never. Never. So that's very clearly brought out in this Dvaita philosophy by Madhvacharya. Vishishtadvaita, Ramanujacharya explains that there is a qualified oneness between the soul and super soul. What is that? Soul and super soul are qualitatively one. We are both spiritual. Krishna is completely spiritual by nature. Even we, each one of us, even in a present condition, we are spirit soul. We are completely spiritual by nature. But we are covered by this material body, material mind, material intelligence because of our desire to enjoy materially. That's all. To facilitate that material enjoyment, we got this covering and we got some instruments to try to enjoy, which we can never do. We can never enjoy really, but we may attempt because we are very, very strongly desirous of enjoyment. So arrangement is there. But actually, we are spirit soul. We are pure spirit. And that specific oneness, qualified oneness, same in quality, but different in quantity. What is the difference in quantity? I am very tiny. I am eternally a servant of Krishna. Krishna is the eternal master of everyone. This is very clearly brought out in Vishishtadvaita philosophy. Ramanacharya teaches that surrender, prapatti, surrender to the Supreme Lord, Krishna. Surrender to Krishna. And you are eternally dasa, eternally a servant. Very clearly brought up. So that is Vishishtadvaita. There is oneness, there is commonality between ourselves and God, but that is qualified oneness. It's not like the Mayavadis say, completely one with God. We are God. I am God. This is what the Mayavada interpretation is, which is completely wrong. I am not God. God is God. I am a tiny spirit soul. Eternally I am that. But I am part of God. I am part of God. So, to understand this oneness and the difference, this Vishishta Dvaita, Vishishta means qualified. A very, very specific way we have got that Advaita, that non-difference or oneness with God. That is explained very nicely. Then Shuddha, Shuddhadvaita. I'm not sure about this, but this also explains the oneness and the difference. The oneness and the difference between ourselves and the Supreme Lord. Dvaita, Advaita is something similar to Bheda, Abheda, which taught by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. There is difference, Dvaita, and Advaita is non-difference between ourselves and God. So, in essence, all the Vaishnava, four Vaishnava Sampradayas are explaining the same philosophy of Krishna consciousness. But the stress is laid on certain specific explanations of the Vedanta Sutra, because of which these terms have come about as the as the name for the philosophy presented by the Acharya. The philosophy is evolving out of the explanation of the Vedanta Sutra. The commentary on the Vedanta Sutra is the basis for these names. Dvaita philosophy, Vishishtadvaita philosophy, Shuddhadvaita philosophy, Dvaitadvaita philosophy, or the four Sampradayas. The four commentaries written by the four Acharyas, prominent Acharyas in these Sampradayas. Madhvacharya has written a commentary called Purna Prajna Bhashya that explains this Dvaita philosophy. And Ramanacharya has written Sri Bhashya, Vishishtadvaita philosophy. And Vishnu Swami has written one Bhashya, I forget the name of that Bhashya on Vedanta Sutra that explains Shuddhadvaita philosophy. And Dvaitadvaita philosophy, Nimbaraka Acharya presents the particular commentary which explains this philosophy on the Vedanta Sutra. So the names have evolved based on the commentary in the Vedanta Sutra, commenting on the Vedanta Sutra, explaining the specific relationship between the soul and super soul. See, this is the whole confusion that exists when people study the Vedas. What is exactly the relationship between the soul and super soul? Because the soul and super soul have been described in some places in the Vedas as one. And there are places in the Vedas where they're described as two distinct entities. So if they are two distinct entities, are they having nothing in common, or if they are one, are they wholly identical in every respect? Both of which are proven to be wrong by the Vaishnava Acharyas. Neither we can say the soul and super soul are completely different as matter and spirit. Neither we can say the soul and super soul are identical in every respect. Even as spiritual by nature, they are not identical in every respect 100%. No. So, what is that oneness and what's the difference? That every Vaishnava Sampradaya explains, but the stress is laid on certain portions of the explanation of the Vedanta Sutra. That's why the names are evolved in this way. Next question. In purport to Bhagavad Gita 15.15, Srila Prabhupada writes, a living entity individually needs to understand Krishna. Kindly explain what individually here means. Okay. Now, each one of us, we are an individual soul. We are an individual soul. So, as an individual soul, we have got individual free will. Free will. So, that free will, I have to exercise my free will. You have to exercise your free will to surrender to Krishna. It doesn't happen by somebody else forcing you to surrender or convincing you to surrender. It doesn't happen that way. Somebody else may convince you, but ultimately you have to exercise your free will. And to exercise your free will, you have to understand Krishna. You have to know Krishna. Because you have to connect with Krishna. And Krishna is a real person. Not some imagination, not some abstract idea, not some kind of abstract entity. No. Krishna is real person, eternal person. Individual souls, each one of us, we are real persons, very, very tiny, although we are persons. And we have a definite loving spiritual relationship with Krishna, each one of us. So, to actually re-establish that lost relationship, forgotten relationship, we have to understand Krishna. We have to understand ourselves. Individually, each person has to do that. But that doesn't mean that everybody has to study all the philosophical books and no, that's not the way. The way is devotional service. The way is devotional service. So you practice devotional service, you make advancement, you will come to know about Krishna, even if you are unable to understand Krishna simply by reading some books or hearing some philosophy. Still, Krishna will enlighten you from within when you make sincere attempts to approach him and to know him through the chanting of Hare Krishna, through taking prasadam, through simple activities of bhakti which are very effective, which is taught by Srila Prabhupada. You perform those activities sincerely with all good intentions, then definitely Krishna from within will enlighten you, will give you knowledge, will guide you, will actually guarantee that you will attain the perfection. Krishna will take care. You surrender by following, by strictly following. Next question. All the qualities of Brahmana as mentioned in Bhagavad Gita are subjective. So how can we categorize people as Brahmana after some ritual ceremony? You cannot say that somebody becomes a Brahmana simply by some ritual. No. Brahman janatiti Brahmanaha. One who has realized himself as Brahman and even the supreme absolute truth as Brahman, only such a person can be called a Brahmana. But then there are stages of development of this realization. What is that? Janmana jayate Shudra. By birth, everyone is born a Shudra. Shudra means one in ignorance. That's all. Don't be scared or alarmed that we are telling by birth everyone is Shudra. Means you're born into ignorance. Ichha dvesha samuttena dvanda mohena bharata sarva bhutani sammoham sarge yanti parantapa. This verse of the Bhagavad Gita in the 7th chapter says, everyone is born into ignorance in this material world. So you require enlightenment. So samskarat bhaved dvijaha. Samskara, there is samskara to be performed to begin Vedic studies. Traditionally, one gets that Upanayana samskara, the sacred thread ceremony, by which one begins to study the Vedas, especially spiritual education, spiritual knowledge. But in Krishna consciousness, by mercy of Prabhupada, anybody starts associating with Krishna conscious devotees or starts chanting Hare Krishna or starts reading Prabhupada's books or starts taking prasadam in ISKCON, their enlightenment in spiritual life has already begun. There's no need to undergo any other ritual. Simply coming in contact with Krishna consciousness, your enlightenment has begun. So, samskarat bhaved vijaha, then Veda pathat bhaved vipra. So, Shudra, Dvija, Vipra. Vipra is one who becomes learned in the Vedic literature, theoretical knowledge one acquires in the Vedic literature by studying under a qualified teacher who can teach the Vedic books, the Vedic texts, the important Vedic texts, describing what is the soul, what is the super soul, what is the relationship. And when one practices the instructions of the Vedas, puts it into practice in daily life, and strives for realization, then when one realizes Brahman, one becomes a Brahmana. One has to make further progress to realize the Paramatma aspect and the Bhagavan aspect of the Absolute Truth. When one progresses further and comes to the platform of understanding Bhagavan, one becomes a Vaishnava, beyond even a Brahmana. So, rituals don't automatically qualify one to be a Brahmana. It's like these qualities described of a Brahmana in the Bhagavad Gita, Shamo, Damo, Tapas, Shaucham, Chantir, sense control, mind control, becoming truthful. Now, becoming truthful means a fully qualified Brahmana never tells a lie under any circumstances. But when somebody starts practicing Krishna consciousness or even following a life as a initiated, a beginner in Vedic studies under a proper Vedic teacher, doesn't mean that that day itself he will stop speaking all lies. No. It takes some time. So, qualities we develop as we purify by the proper method of purification. Whether as a Brahmana or as a Vaishnava, as a devotee or as a cultured, civilized human being. These qualities are developed as the purification happens. Next question. Is it mandatory for a devotee to be in the renounced order of life to write books as per Srila Prabhupada? No. Nothing, no injunction exists like that. Anybody who is a devotee who has been practicing Krishna consciousness, Prabhupada says, write down your realizations. Write down your realizations. And Prabhupada encouraged his disciples and his followers to contribute especially for writing articles and for magazines, including Back to Godhead. And other magazines also. Whatever you have studied, whatever you have understood, whatever you have realized, you write and try to preach by speaking and explaining to people, and by writing and presenting the subject matter in an easily understandable way for a particular audience, in a particular magazine, a particular subject or a particular topic relevant to the modern times, you write the Krishna conscious perspective. And you explain, if you can, write. Anybody who can write a nice article or a nice explanation or a nice story should write. So it is not required that one has to be in the renounced order for that. Even a grahastha, brahmachari, vanaprastha, anybody can write. Is Brahmastra more powerful or Vajrastra of Indra? Now, the power of the Astra is not merely because it is a Brahmastra or Vajrastra. The power of the Astra lies in the particular person who is using that Astra. What is the power of that person to use that Astra? What is the particular mantra the person is using? If it is a mantra that is used to release that Astra, or what is the particular weapon itself the person is having. Absolute power of any Astra is with Krishna only. It's like Krishna has got a disc, Sudarshan Chakra. Sudarshan Chakra is unlimitedly powerful. But Krishna will use it for specific purposes. Just like when Krishna had to cut off the head of Shishupala. So the Sudarshan Chakra was released simply when cut off the head of Shishupala and came back to Krishna. So like that, the Astras also, Indra, he may use this Vajrayudha, his particular Astra he has, for specifically killing a particular demon, or we may use it for killing demons in general when there's a battle between the demigods and the demons, like that. So it is all very, very particular use and the power which the particular user has got. The user has got. So you cannot relatively say which is more powerful. No. In the Bhagavatam, Brahmastra is mentioned as the ultimate weapon. Ultimate weapon from the perspective of Brahmastra being used to destroy the whole universe. In that sense, it is described as the ultimate weapon. Brahmastra can be used for different purposes. Just like that Ashwatthama released the Brahmastra to kill specifically Parikshit in the womb of Uttara. Krishna nullified that weapon by entering the womb of Uttara and neutralizing that weapon. So it could not destroy Parikshit. It was meant for that particular purpose. But Brahmastra can destroy the universe if it is utilized for that purpose. So like that, it's an ultimate weapon. So I'll stop here. Rest of the questions I'll try to answer in the next week's exclusive question answer session. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.